For his invaluable contributions and service to Indian education, Professor Rajaraman has been recognized with India's leading academic, research and civilian honors, including the Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize, the Homi Bhabha Prize and the Padma Bhushan. Thank you, Professor Rajaraman, for inviting us to your home and joining us in this conversation today.
Thank you for the nice introduction.
So let's begin at the beginning. You joined IITK in 1963,
Right.
while it was still operating from makeshift facilities at the Harcourt Butler Technological Institute.
Correct.
What attracted you to IITK at the time, and did you have apprehensions coming from a large and established university like the University of Wisconsin at Madison to an upstart institute that IITK was at the time?
Well, I had decided at the end of my PhD at the University of Wisconsin, I was offered a assistant professor's position in the Department of Statistics in the university. And in those days, you're allowed 18 months practical training after your education. So I joined, but I was clear in my mind that I wouldn't settle in the US. Various reasons, including that I thought I wouldn't fit in that environment. And so at the end of 1 year, my stay at the Department of Statistics, I decided to come back to India, and made a mistake of not getting a job before leaving. I was cocky and overconfident, and I said that with all my education and so on, people will welcome me with an open arms. And so I came back in November of 1963, 62, I returned to India, and I wrote letters to various IITs giving my biodata and saying I'd like to have a position, and each IIT reacted differently. The only IIT which was somewhat welcoming was IIT Kanpur, which asked me to come and give a seminar. That time the Kanpur IIT was in HBTI, and after I came back in November, and the invitation came in December to come and give a seminar. I went to IITK, and there are about Professor Kelkar was there, and Professor Mathana was there, and some of the American professors had already joined. There was Arthur Gill was in the electrical engineering department, and then there are about 6 or 7 professors of the institute. Professor Mahanti was there, P.T. Narasimhan was there, and so I gave this seminar to about 20-25 people. And in those days, of course, you had that slides, 35 millimeter slides, and talked about my research work which I had done. And then I returned back to Delhi where I was staying, and waited and waited. And after about a month or so, they said they had to have a selection committee, statutory selection committee, because I was already in India. If I were abroad, they could have offered me without any interview. But because I was in India, I had to be interviewed. So I waited, and sometime in, I think, end of January, I got an interview letter. I went to the HBTI campus, and there was interviewed by about 15 people, including the Professor Norman Dahl, who was the leader of the KAP program, and of course all the apart from the statutory committee which is there has people from other places. I distinctly remember Mr. F.C. Kohli was there as one of the people who interviewed me, and so after interview they don't tell you what happened. So I go back and wait and wait and wait, And March, I got a letter saying that you are selected. You may join whenever you want. So pronto I joined.
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
getting
So,
in.
so you weren't apprehensive in part because nobody else was offering you at the time,
Yeah,
which
nobody
I guess
was-
they discovered to their regret later
no,
in life. But
if I had waited, probably I would have been able to get into some other IIT. But IITK had a lot of promise. One of the main promises was that it is up and coming, new, and can be a person who can make a difference to the institute. And the fact that Americans are already there, and as I said, the only institute which cared to call me for a seminar. Other places were not very interested. They said, wait for an advertisement in the paper and apply for it, and then you'll be interviewed in due course.
yeah. So yes, I guess they were traditional institutes.
Yeah,
one of
right.
the things that you mentioned when you joined IIT Kanpur, that as an upcoming institute, as a relatively new institute, it focused upon some very transformative changes to India's educational
Right,
system.
correctly,
And the semester system, which was novel at the time, a very heavy humanities requirement, the letter grading system, grading on a curve. All of these are now commonplace, but they were very radical at that particular time.
Definitely, it's true.
So can you speak to what were the factors that shaped these kinds of transformations in education at IIT Kanpur?
To begin with, the very idea of calling an applicant for a seminar was new. No other institute had that idea of calling a person for a seminar before interviewing. So that itself was a transformative. And many, because most places will just interview you. And nowadays it has become common to, even in India also, to call a person for a seminar before he is formally interviewed. So that is a pioneering step which IITK took. And there's a long conversation between Professor Norman Dahl and Professor Kelkar about the need for this transformation. And of course there is a faculty is also all coming from US mostly, and many of them were recruited while they are still in US. Like all my colleagues who joined later, Professor Pai, Professor Keshavan, Professor Brau, all of them came within about 6 months of my joining, but all of them had been given an appointment while they were still in US. And they came back with their families. And all of them are kind of homogeneous in terms of having similar ambitions to change the situation in the country and bring in change in the educational system. So all of us are also used to the grading system and the core curriculum and so on. So it fit in very quickly. And so as you put it, many of them, like the grading on the curve, core curriculum, and humanities. In fact, one of the questions is asked in my interview was, they said, what do you think about humanities? And I said 15% should be given for humanities. That 15%, as I said, 15% would be reasonable. And later on, of course, it was around 15%, which the institute gave, because I was convinced that a broad education is required for engineers. And most of the other institutions, humanities was looked down upon as not required for engineering. The only little change in the Institute of Science where I studied, there are some humanities. We had in undergraduate curriculum 2 languages we had to study, German and French. Apart from that, we had 1 economics course and 1 sociology course. So I had some kind of a feeling about having some humanities and language studies. But of course in Kanpur, by the time I think Kanpur came, the importance of French and German had gone down. And in the early days, journals were in French and German, and you're expected to learn German and French. Even in the University of Wisconsin, to get a PhD, you had to pass 2 language tests. I took French and German.
So it seems that there was a different scheme for faculty that were recruited abroad and the faculty that were recruited in India.
Right.
Why was that and how was it different?
Faculty who were recruited abroad, they were not interviewed. They depended entirely on the reference letters given by their professors. And sometimes a professor in that one of the universities used to go and talk to them. And also many of them are already teaching there. So they are uprooting their families and coming. And so the entire expenses for uprooting, including airfare and bringing all their possessions and so on, all paid for by the Kanpur Indo-American program. And so that attracted a number of Indians who were actually working there to come. In fact, for example, Professor Keshavan was the chairman of the electrical engineering department at the University of Waterloo. And he left that and came and joined IIT Kanpur as the chairman of the Department of Electrical Engineering at that time.
So was it simply the recruitment that was different, or the compensation system was also different for these?
Compensation was not different. It is as per the government rules in terms of the salary scales and so on. Only the recruitment method was different.
So IIT Kanpur acquired its first computer, the IBM 1620, in August 1963. Its transportation on a bullock cart to the campus and installation in the Western Lab is legendary, actually, almost. Talk to us about that experience and what happened then.
I was in the electrical engineering department at that time. There is no computer center. And I remember distinctly the bullock cart coming to the back side of the Western Lab building. And they found that the machine was too large to transport it through the main door. So they had to break the wall, backside wall of the Western Lab. And after breaking the wall, the machine was moved in and the wall was put in again. And they had to air condition the room. And that was quite a headache at that time. Because with rains, the water was flooding into that room. And but the entire installation was done by the IBM's local engineers, but it was supervised by the 3 people who came with the machine. Professor Husky was the leader of the team. Professor Foreman Acton was a numerical analyst, and Rabinovich was a systems programmer. So these 3 people formed the team, core team, which set up the computer.
So why did they need to use a bullock cart? I assume it came from elsewhere on some regular transport, right?
No, it came by plane, and the plane landed in Chakeri airport. The reason they used a bullock cart is that they put pneumatic tires on their bullock carts so that the machine will not shake too much. If it shakes too much, they are afraid that the circuits will give up. So they put it in they thought about a truck, but then they thought the truck will be too rash. Roads of Kanpur were not good enough. And particularly the road from Chakeri was not very good. And so they thought that bringing it slowly on a bullock cart with pneumatic tires will not shake the machine too much. And that's the reason.
Okay. Now the institute established a computer center in 1964 and then introduced an MTech specialization within electrical engineering in 1965.
Correct.
You were the convener of the CS program at that point, which would have been the first academic program in computer science in India. Explain how that came about and what were some of the drivers for creating that program.
Actually, the Professor Keshavan, who was the chairman of the electrical engineering department, was very forward-looking. In fact, one of the very interesting recommendations he had made was to put student representation in the Senate, that early in the game, and which no other IITs even ever thought of. And he said that unless we have a postgraduate program early enough, the faculty who have come will rust in terms of not being able to do research. So it's important to have a research program. And so a master's was started in electrical engineering. And computers are just coming up. And Kanpur was very fortunate in having one of the first computers in the country. And we said, with this asset, we should really have a computer science option within the Department of Electrical Engineering. As I already had a background in computing, I had taken courses in computing during my postgraduate degree in US, and so I was the most suitable person at that time to take the responsibility. And later on, Professor Mahabala joined, and he joined around 65, around the time the department started. So both of us together started this program.
Now this program became exceedingly popular within the electrical engineering,
Right, correct.
And it created some friction as a result. So can you speak about that?
Yeah, what happened was that the number of students admitted to MTech program was limited to around 15 or so, and almost about 10 of them used to come to the computer science specialization, and other department faculty were not getting students to work with, and so they are somewhat unhappy that there is an exodus like this. And but then when the move came to separate out computer science as a separate program, there is not much resistance. In fact, they welcomed it, that you better go away.
Yeah, so they can get their 15
Yeah,
students.
Right. They can get their quota students.
So that was the 1971 program,
71.
which is an interdisciplinary program
Right,
at that
correct.
point.
There are 3 interdisciplinary programs started simultaneously, one in material science, one in computer science, and one in industrial engineering and management. So these 3 programs were started. There's also one more program in nuclear engineering which is proposed, but I don't think it really made any substantial move.
So even at this time, we do not have a department of computer science. We just have an interdisciplinary program that has been put together.
Yeah, because interestingly, statutes of the IIT statutes have put in the statutes what departments will be there in various institutes. So IITK very clearly mentioned departments, starting with aero, and all the departments are mentioned. So computer science is not mentioned as a department. So they couldn't start it as a department. So it's called a program.
Okay. The IIT Kanpur then acquired the DEC 1090 in 1979.
Right.
And you mentioned earlier also that IIT Kanpur acquired one of the first computers in the country, for that matter. How was that another computer hardware that IIT Kanpur had? How significant was that in the evolution of the program?
Very important, because the students who were in the master's program were working part-time with the computers in terms of helping users to program, and they also were quite conversant with the machine. And so the availability of computers was very important for the students to have hands-on with those machines, and they worked fairly, they were a lot more practical in terms of understanding the internal working of the machine, besides the theoretical courses they are working on. And in fact, 7044 was very important for that in those days, because that is the first large mainframe which came into an IIT, which followed 1620. And of course, 1090 came as an interactive machine. By the time IBM, DEC 1090 came, the punch card era had ended. It was just terminals with which you entered the computer.
Now, the BTech program in computer science was started in 1979.
78.
78.
Yeah.
Why did it take so much longer to start the BTech program as opposed to the master's programs?
Well, the Senate and Institute, in fact, the move was made to start a BTech program in 75, 76, around that time. And I tried to convince the Senate and to have a computer science undergraduate program. The Senate was not convinced. In fact, 3 or 4 meetings, they all said that what is computer science? Just programming. And what is the future? Just programmers, what can they do? And so it is not a discipline like mechanical engineering or electrical engineering and so on. And it is something which we feel it's like another occupation, like program which is not academic but more vocational. And so I had to convince the Senate over three or 4 meetings, and finally the Senate was convinced by my speaking to them individually, many of these Senate professors, showing them that it is not entirely new, that such programs already existed abroad, and that there are curricula which are being formed by professional societies, and all this kind of convinced them. And Professor Bhattacharya had come as a new director at that time, and also I had to convince him, and he was convinced. Once he was convinced, it was passed through the Senate. But the Senate was very reluctant in giving seats because the total number of BTech seats was limited, and each department had to kind of forego some seats to give to the computer science. So civil engineering gave 2 or 3, mechanical gave 2 or 3. Finally, 20 seats were allotted by various departments, and department couldn't be started because statutes did not have a department. So it's called a computer science program, and so it's a BTech computer science program. And in fact, one of the professors of IIT Kanpur called me and said, "How can you start an undergraduate program without a department?" He said, "Kanpur does it differently." Okay, Kanpur is different. We do things differently.
Now, what do you call this resistance that was within the faculty for creating this program, in part because they felt it was vocational as opposed to academic, that as a result, the time that it took to get a program at IIT
took about a couple of years. Really.
But so we were not the first undergraduate program in computer science. Can
what
you
happened
speak
was,
to that? Yeah.
Professor Jagdish Lal was acting director at IIT Kanpur, who had come from Motilal Nehru College of Engineering. And during his time, all this debate took place in the Senate. And when he was there, he couldn't get the program through. When he went to Motilal Nehru College, he got it through in the Motilal Nehru College, and the first BTech program was started in Motilal Nehru College. And so we had to wait for the new director to take over and convince the new director, and so it was delayed by 1 year. I think he started 1 year before we did.
Yeah. Okay. Now the BTech program proved exceedingly popular and surprised a lot of people, given the fact that there was so much opposition to it. It became the destination of choice, continues to this day for JEE students. And by 1980, as I understand it, the cutoff for admission to IITK's CS program, which had 20 seats at that time, was All India rank 40.
That is first batch itself. very first batch. That is it. That's what took everybody by surprise. The entire institute faculty was taken by surprise when the last student admitted to CS program was All India 40. And this also surprised all the other IITs. They didn't expect that. And so that essentially woke up the other IITs, and 2 years later, other IITs started their BTech programs.
So, how were the other IITs, if the students, obviously the appeal was there, how was it that the other IITs, even seeing that IIT Kanpur had begun processes and graduate programs, that they were not seeing the potential of computer science?
Because they didn't have a computer to begin with. Of course, computers came later. Kanpur was pioneer in two ways. One is the computer came, and we also had the core curriculum. One computer programming course, TA 306, was introduced as a core curriculum course for all engineers. And that made a big difference later on. In fact, I remember that some of the leaders of industry, in computer industry, like Som Mittal, Bhaskar Pramanik and others, when I met them, they said, well, you introduced computers to us through TA 306. Now we are in this field. And in fact, the fact that computing was becoming a part of the core curriculum and all engineers learned it made a big difference as far as IIT is concerned. And other IITs are slow in realizing that. And of course, they got computers also later. The Delhi IIT got a British computer, ICL machine. And in fact, 3 of our faculty, in fact, PhD students, and one of them was a faculty member, they went to IIT Delhi to start their program. And of course, Mahabala took two other people, 3 of them went to IIT Madras and started the program in IIT Madras. And Bombay had a machine from Russia, and they started a program with a Russian machine. And Kharagpur was a little late and getting a machine. And then they also, once they got the machine, they started the program.
So would it be fair to say that hardware was very important in the early success of IIT Kanpur's program?
Definitely, because you had to have a machine to program. You can't just teach programming without a machine.
Who were the, you have mentioned a few of them already, but who were some of the important faculty members in the development of IIT Kanpur's program?
See, at the beginning, there was myself and Mahabala and Hari Sahasrabuddhe, who got a PhD in the institute itself, and Professor Muthukrishnan, who also got his PhD from the institute. Radhakrishnan was there, and we had one Professor Basu who came from TIFR. And so at the beginning we had about, and then Professor Narsingh came a little later, and we had about a core group of about 8 or 9 by the time we started the BTech program. And before that itself, I think Mahabala left with Muthukrishnan and Radhakrishnan. So we came down from 6 to 3 suddenly. So, but then we grew again. And it was one of the few departments which had to inbreed, because we couldn't get people from abroad to the course. So we did inbreed. That is, we took our own PhDs into the faculty, whereas it was not normal in the other departments.
Many of the students from that time, Rajiv Motwani comes to mind,
Right.
Went on to become leaders in their field.
Right.
You had some interaction with him. Can you speak about both him as well as some of the other alumni of the program of that period, and what they have done in this field?
Well, in fact, I remember two students whose parents came to me. Professor Motwani's father came to me and said, "Is there any future in computing?" So he is wanting to kind of join this program, but I'm not very clear about this. And I said, of course, it's a future, so you don't have to worry at all. about putting your boy into this program. And Srivatsav's another student whose father came, and he went to, later on after BTech, he became professor at the University of Minnesota, and he's quite well known in databases. And I met him later on when he was a student in Berkeley. And so there are the early first batch students, at least 2 or 3 of their parents were kind of worried about putting their wards into this program, and of course I had to convince them. And then they done very well, of course. Motwani did very well, and Srivatsav did very well. And in fact, my only surprise, and also I would say I felt bad about it, that out of the 20 students who graduated in the first batch, 18 vanished to USA. And I said, are we putting all these students through and creating this new department and new students just to export? And that was somewhat disappointing to me. And one of the reasons, of course, which drove me to Institute of Science.
That was one of the factors.
One of the factors is that students who are being trained are all going away.
Okay. Now the success of IITK's program, I think you already mentioned, prodded many of the other IITs, and by 1984 all the IITs had a computer science department.
Then the department came, it took that long, you know. It's not immediate. The 78 we started, and
without a department.
Without a department. 84 the department was formed. So 6 years it took for the government. They had to, all the statutes had to be changed. The statutes are passed by the parliament. So the act has to be changed, IIT Act. So that takes a long time. And ministers are very, very worried about going to parliament. They want to postpone that as much as possible.
IIT Kanpur's computer science program prodded many of the other IITs to also start their own programs, and by 1984 all the IITs had a computer science department, as did IIT Kanpur. Can you talk about the influence of IIT Kanpur's programs on computer science education both in India and within the IIT system?
IIT system, as I said, the Delhi IIT as well as Madras IIT, the faculty went from IIT Kanpur.
That was Professor Bhatt.
Professor Bhatt
to Delhi, and Mahabala.
Ibrahim Shah went, Dr. Ibrahim Shah, and to Madras, Mahabala, Muthukrishnan, Radhakrishnan, and other engineering colleges, people went from Kanpur, who were MTech students, not PhDs. And later on, of course, from institutes, from IIT, people went to abroad as well as other institutions in India.
Well, you also went to ISC, so I guess you contributed, there. Talk then more broadly about the graduates of that era and the influence that they have had in the expansion of the computer industry within India, as well as in education, not just in India, but many of them went, as you said, the vast majority went abroad.
Yeah, BTechs, but the MTechs, most of them stayed in India. MTechs and PhDs, most of them stayed in India. So, and in fact, the early MTech students went to, the hardware types went to DCM data products, just starting, which again became HCL. So many of the hardware, early mini computers made in India were designers or from MTech students from IIT Kanpur. And a huge number of people went to TCS. In fact, Mr. Kohli told that he took about 10 of our MTechs in one batch. And it so happened that many of them were from South India. So apparently he was blamed for recruiting only South Indians to the TCS. And TCS in those days, because we also, the entire TCS training program for their inductees were designed by IIT Kanpur faculty. And we also gave the first early courses for the trainees which are joining TCS. And so HCL, DCM, TCS, PSI in Bangalore, many of them, our MTech students, went both as designers of mini computers and also as programmers. And so some of them went and later on became entrepreneurs, because the most famous being Narayan Murthy. Then Kale, Narendra Kale, he started, and Pisharoti, who started his own company in Pune. There are about 5 or 6 of them started companies of their own. I don't remember all their names. And many of them later on became leaders of even multinationals. Like IBM India, Pawan Kumar became the director of IBM India, and Bhaskar Pramanik became the head of the DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation. And so Mittal was an HP. So many of them from Kanpur went, but they are not computer science students like So Mittal and so on. But Narayan Murthy and Kale and Pisharoti, they're all students of Kanpur MTech program.
Speak a little bit to that, because the IITs, I think, have been recognized more for their undergraduate students, really, right?
Yeah.
But from what you are talking just now, the master's students have played a pretty significant contribution in computer science education, at least in India, and maybe within India, even in industry. So speak about both, your observations on the graduate programs of the IITs versus the undergraduate programs.
The graduate program, the important aspect of graduate program is that we took this most of the undergraduates who joined the master's program were not IIT students. They came from other engineering colleges, and they were quite good. And by the time they ended up getting their MTech, they were very good. And one interesting aspect is that most of the MTech stayed in India. Not many of them went abroad, whereas most of the BTech ended up abroad. Okay. And in fact, also most of the PhDs stayed in India. And the entire electronics, many of the PhDs who graduated under me, when I was in Kanpur, about 15 PhDs graduated. And out of the 15, about 6 went to academics, and about 9 went to partly industry and partly the Department of Electronics, with the National Informatics Center. In fact, the National Informatics Center grew out of many of our PhDs who went there. And so I think the postgraduate programs were quite important in computer science, because there's no undergraduate program at that time, and the postgraduates tended to, they mainly stayed in India.
Now, IIT Kanpur's computer science program no longer has quite the sheen or the predominance that it once did, certainly in the 1980s and maybe all the way up to the 1990s and even 2000. So was it inevitable that computer science education, as it expanded to the other IITs, and whereas hardware was not as important a factor, is that the reason for this shift, or did IIT Kanpur miss some opportunities?
IIT Kanpur missed opportunities in 2 ways. One is, of course, location. See, as the current group of faculty who join, both the husband and wife work, and the opportunities for the wife to work is not enough in Kanpur. So Kanpur has got that locational disadvantage. Apart from the fact that Kanpur is not a metropolis like Bombay or Delhi or Chennai, the opportunities for the wives to work is not there. So the new faculty who want to join also look for opportunities for their spouses, and that is not there in Kanpur. And secondly, Kanpur was not aggressive enough in trying to get faculty to come and join. I think but IIT Bombay particularly was very aggressive. they used to go out and get people and give them reasonably good offers to join. And IIT Chennai also was reasonably aggressive. In fact, IIT Kanpur, IIC was not aggressive. In fact, we lost a lot of number of our prospects to IIT Bombay, mainly because they're quite aggressive in recruitment. And so the Bombay also has that advantage of having industry around and very good opportunities for spouses. And I think I'm worried about all the IITs starting in places like Ropar and Mandi and all that, because the current situation is that both husband and wife work. And of course, Kanpur had that rule that the spouse will not be employed as a faculty member. Many of the faculty members had spouses who were well qualified, but they were not employed by IIT because there is a rule against employing them.
So outside faculty recruitment, which is, as you're saying, a challenge both from a location standpoint and other considerations, are there other elements that have affected the computer science program's success at IIT? I mean, are there other opportunities in terms of areas or disciplines or fields that we neglected perhaps?
I don't think so. I think current faculty group is quite broad and quite good. I wouldn't say that the quality of the faculty which is currently there is quite good. It is not mediocre or anything like that. It is, but it is not as good as, say, IIT Bombay in terms of the publications they bring out and the number of PhDs who are graduated and so on. But Kanpur has done fairly well in terms of the overall development of the computer science education, even after the 90s. It's not all that.
But we are not number one anymore.
We are not number one. Number one now, the number one from the point of view of students seeking admission is IIT Bombay. In fact, I looked at the papers 2 days ago. The first ranker from Bangalore, when asked where would you go and join, says computer science at Bombay IIT.
Yeah. Okay, well, computers are now an integral part of everyday life, which we certainly wouldn't have said in 1970s.
Right. Definitely not. I wouldn't have dreamt. I never dreamt that someday you'll have in your pocket a computer. Okay.
So given that computer literacy and coding skills are now increasingly integrated even in general education.
Yeah, right.
At the same time, we have this growing attention that is now being paid to machine learning and artificial intelligence and generative AI.
Right.
So what do you see as the future of computer science education, both in the general education as well as in the specialized programs of computer
general
science?
education, it should become part and parcel, like, right from school days. One should be aware of how to use computers effectively and how to program it. Programming is also important to understand how to kind of have a logical thinking to give a sequence of instructions to a machine. And of course, people are worried about the current AI development. And today's paper has an article where Geoffrey Hinton, who started this whole development neural networks, which has ended up in ChatGPT, is worried about AI taking over. I am not that worried. I mean, it is going to definitely change the way in which we work. But when computers first came, people were worried about. In fact, the Automation Committee report of the Government of India said computers should not be brought to India because it will displace people from their job. But today, of course, that is the largest foreign exchange earner and probably the biggest employer in Bangalore. Every other person who is mentioned in the newspaper for various reasons like accident or and so on is a techie. It's called techie. So software is an integral part of life in Bangalore. And so it's become it's quite different now. So it's become part of life, everybody's life.
If you can speak on computer science education going forward, with all these dramatic changes that are taking place.
Well, AI is going to have a serious impact in computing. By and large, computing education is going to seep into every area. So you just cannot have, you can't be called fully educated unless you have a reasonable knowledge about computers and their role and how they work and what their impact would be and so on. So apart from academics in computing, the fact that it becomes a part and parcel of our life should make people aware of its drawbacks, advantages, and so on. So I see a bright future for computing education and research in that area, and also more and more people are going to get into that area.
But so we are talking at one level of computers basically penetrating all aspects of human life, and therefore, if you are in biomed engineering, you are also dealing with that subject. What about specialized computer science education? What role will that have then?
Specialized computer education is, after all, tools are generated or made by computer scientists. So newer and better tools, both in software and hardware. In fact, the fact that you got very high capacity processors which you can put in the pocket means that somebody has designed that. So that is designed by computer scientists. Like every gadget you have has some computer built in. Every motor car has got about 15 microprocessors in them. So everything is controlled. With new electric cars coming in, the entire car industry is going to be transformed by both what software goes into it and what hardware goes into it. People have to know how to design both the hardware and software, and that education has got to be specialized. Apart from the education on how to use it effectively and responsibly.
So I guess I'm in a field called journalism, and I guess we have AI that is now churning out articles. I'm reading stories on a daily basis of how paralegals may no longer be relevant because it can do a lot of those functions. So is there something about AI also that will impact computer education and computer science itself? Because a lot of coding and all can also be done by this AI. Yes. So I mean, are we also seeing perhaps
there is going to be a shift, definitely. There is going to be a shift, just like when computers came, there is a shift. And that shift is hopefully going to make life better than worse. And so when the first, the most interesting example I normally give is the arrival of the railway reservation system in India. Before that, everything was manual, and there was one clerk who was having a ledger, and you couldn't book a ticket from, say, Kanpur to Bangalore unless a telegram is sent to bomb Chennai, and another telegram comes back from Chennai. Before you know you have a seat, it takes 10 days. Okay, and when the first computers came for reservation, people were worried that these clerks will be put out of jobs. But what was found was that the number of jobs increased, because instead of having one reservation office, now they had several reservation offices. And so many more clerks were employed, and it's a lot more convenient to people. So it actually changed the mindset of people, saying it doesn't really eliminate employment, but actually creates employment, and also improves the convenience of people. Of course, now you can book from home, the coming of the internet and so on, may have made those clerks redundant. You don't anymore go to a reservation counter, you do it from home. But that has changed in a different way. So people are employed now in creating that software. So the nature of employment has changed. So the nature of education has changed. People have to be better educated, and they got to start specializing and be definitely better than machine. Okay.
So I guess my last question to you would be, is there something that we have missed that you think is important in terms of on computer science education and your relationship with IIT Kanpur?
Not really. Only thing which I would like to mention is that my period of 20 years at Kanpur IIT was my most memorable, because there is a time things grew from nothing to a status where IITK counted as an institution. Okay. The only negative aspect of IIT Kanpur's development was that the attention which was paid to faculty development, student development, was not paid to support staff development. So support staff became restive, and that led to problems like strikes and shouting and all that, and disturbing classes. And if we had paid a little bit more attention to the non-academic staff that we paid to the academic staff and the academics, maybe Kanpur would have grown in a better way.
Thank you, Dr. Rajaraman, for joining us on IIT Conversations.